We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore Positive. Set a spot on your dial. Make sure you're subscribing, clicking on me, doing all that fun stuff. We had a great Maryland Crabcake Tour stop at one of my favorite places. It's one of Luke's favorite places as well because I have lots of pictures of both of us together there with Steve Smith and CJ Mosley and Marshall Yonda, Zach Orr. Just went down the list. Pat Ricard, all sorts of fun stuff we did at Greenmount Station. On Thursday, I reunited with the first person who ever did Luke's job, which was being a Ravens reporter out at training camp in 1998, handing cell phones to Rod Woodson and Ray Lewis. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We get together and do these crab cake tours, and I just released a holiday schedule. It does not have Mariah Carey music under it. I would go for a Burl Ives, especially after the Snow Globe game on Thursday night out in Cleveland. Also, our friends at Jiffy Lube Multicare. I got my little ding ding thing, $10. Get the off the oil change thing. It's time. My little orange lights on. Jiffy Lube, always around the corner, always doing it right, and always local. And powering Luke up back and forth, not just to Pittsburgh last week. Weird week, dude. Right? HarBowl versus HarBowl. Franchise here is a little wobbly right now, just a little bit. I mean, they still got the quarterback. They got health for the most part. We'll talk about Roquan, but extra day and a half. They're going out to Hollywood early. That could get Chris McAllister in trouble back in the day. I was on that trip. And I 7-5 on Tuesday morning. Short week Eagles. Woo! But flying 3,000 miles and going to beat your brother out there when things aren't going great here, and man, this is a Monday Night Football game, Lucas Jones.
Yeah, well, we know it's a Monday Night Football game, but plenty on the line. Certainly an opportunity to close the gap in the AFC North with Pittsburgh having lost in Cleveland. A reminder there that it's AFC North football. And it's one reason why most of my frustration as I looked at what happened last Sunday in Pittsburgh was not really the implications of the standings. I didn't think the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to run the table. I wasn't saying I was necessarily expecting a loss for them on Thursday night, but I don't think they're that kind of team that was going to run the table or win all but one game the rest of the way. So for me, it was much more the big picture of the Ravens losing to Pittsburgh again, rather than what it meant in the standings in the here and now. But to your point, you need to go out to Los Angeles and take care of business on Monday night. This is a Chargers team that is playing much better football as the year goes on. Their offense is playing at a higher level. Justin Herbert has been red hot here in recent weeks. We know
They're
they have
under new management.
They are under new management. As Patrick Ricard called it earlier this week, it's like the LA Ravens. We've been talking about that storyline going back to January, I guess, February. So certainly a lot of familiarity. To your point, the HarBowl, Jim versus John, which I think is a story that there's more interest outside of Baltimore than locally, just because we've lived that before on a much bigger stage than Monday Night Football. But certainly there's interest there, but the urgency is there. I think I'm working on this right now as you and I speak at BaltimorePositive.com. Lamar Jackson and this offense have earned the benefit of the doubt to expect them to rebound, to bounce back after an off day in Pittsburgh, right? I think we all feel that way. The numbers don't lie, right? You don't just throw all that away because of one performance against the Steelers. For the defense, which was the silver lining, the bright spot in Pittsburgh on Sunday, I'm much more of the thought of, show me that again. Show me the progress that you made against the Steelers defensively. Do that again, because Kyle Hamilton was the first one who mentioned this. You think back to what the Ravens did in week 4, that Sunday night game against Josh Allen and the Bills, where they just dominated. That had been their best defensive performance of the year. What did they follow that up with? They went to Cincinnati and gave up a season high for points the next week. So I think there very much is a sense of, okay, maybe they've figured out some things on the back end of the defense and some shuffling there. Ardarius Washington starting now. Kyle Hamilton playing off the ball a little more frequently this past Sunday than what we're accustomed to seeing, out of necessity because safety has been such a problem for them. But if you go out to LA on Monday night and the Chargers score 30 plus on you, what did that Pittsburgh outing really show, right? What did that really prove? So I think for me, all eyes are really on the defense in terms of this team making progress. I expect Lamar and even if Lamar and the offense don't light up the scoreboard necessarily because the Chargers have a good defense as well. I'm still very confident in that group in a big picture sense. But for the defense, I want to see it again. It was encouraging. Hey, you held Russell Wilson and the Steelers to no touchdowns, right? I mean, they obviously gave the Ravens a chance to win on a day where the offense was really off. But I need to see some stacking of some consistent performances here, and it'll be a good test because, like I said, this Chargers offense, which earlier in the year was kind of struggling to find its way, it kind of looked the stale version of a Greg Roman offense, running the ball somewhat well, but not doing a whole lot else. They've really come on here these last few weeks. And like I said, Justin Herbert is playing at a high level. So Ravens defense, the back end of that defense is certainly going to get a test on Monday night.
Luke is here. You can follow him out at Baltimore Luke all weekend and into Monday Night Football. And we're serving up a whole bunch of music classic. So if your timeline's getting hit on that, click on the Billy Joel thing or go listen to the Black Crowes thing. I actually heard the Black Crowes thing in the car the other day, and I almost want to get under the dashboard myself. Some of it's a little awkward, but sort of cool to have it 40 years later. But so the rock and roll stuff is out. We've talked a lot of baseball around here. Marty Conway joined us. Our friends at Coppin. We talked a lot about leadership this week, and we did our Crabcake tour. We're doing a whole holiday thing. But for the Ravens, and I think for NFL teams, and let's big picture this for 1 minute. You hate Thursday night football. I hate Thursday night football. And that's because we know football players. And we've been in that locker room on Wednesday to see what they look like on Wednesday after a Sunday and know. And you've been doing it 15 years. I did it for 27 years. Like, it's just, if there were anyone medical or not bean countery or even just talking to coaches or doctors or football play anyone, they would tell you this is a horrible idea, right? Like Baldinger told me 30 years ago, fruit fly every 7 days. We play 7 days. That's what the body needs. That's like just where it's at, right? Like racehorses. Every spring I get Dick Girardi. He's like, yeah, they used to run the horses every 2 weeks. Then they started killing them. Now the horses that are worth $10 million, they only run them every 4 weeks, and that's why the Preakness gets screwed, right? Because these people are judging animals and realizing it's a bad idea, and these are humans. And we see Thursday night for the preparation, for the slop, and then the snow comes, and then Pittsburgh's vulnerable on the road, and everybody should have bet on Cleveland, and I'm an idiot, and I would have made a fortune. So, but I'm not a rambling, gambling man. The Ravens now are going to be short rest this week. This is the weird part. I looked at their schedule for you and me. Like, hey, when's Luke and I going to work Christmas an hour? They play Christmas night. We ain't working 26 in the morning. Saturday night games. They play Pittsburgh Saturday night on a holiday weekend. And like their timing and their calendars are going to be not normal any of the rest of the way, playing what was Wednesday night football a couple of years ago, which is Wednesday night football again this year, after Saturday night football. Like, I'm concerned about that part of it. And if I were out there asking John, and John would guffaw it, and I get some dumb answer on the podium, but like, I think behind the scenes, when they see a schedule like this and look up, we're going to get back from LA at 8 in the morning, you know what I mean, on Tuesday, and have to play the Eagles on like, and it was mentioned here earlier this week about flexing that game. The Steelers couldn't flex Sunday because they were already playing Thursday, so they couldn't even get what they wanted on television, which is Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and ratings and like all that, because they got to get these games in. This scheduling of all of this for me is a concern and something that should be talked about, and I'm sure has been talked about a ton in that building, where they're measuring, every eyelid and how much rest they're getting, and they're going out to LA early this weekend. We'll see how that helps them on Monday night. I'm not convinced they're the better team on Monday night all the way around based on the body of work that I think. I don't want to yell overrated at them, but right now, so far, I mean, they need to do more work. But the rest of this schedule is way more daunting. Even with the off time they have a lot of off time. They have these weird, we don't play, and then we're going to play 3 times in 11 days. Like, speak to that, or is anybody out there speaking to that?
Well, I mean, there's only so much. I mean, they're not going to just sit there and say, woe is me, right? And that serves you no purpose as an athlete either, right? I mean, you're not going to sit there and just moan about it. Probably the time for them to do that was back in May when the schedule came out, right? I mean, that's probably when they really did that. But it's a challenge. There's no question about it. I think what really helps, and you just alluded to it, is you do have the December 8th bye. You have this late bye week that I think is going to be very beneficial for them. And it's not because they're so injured right now. It's just the wear and tear, right? I mean, these guys have been at it for close to 3 months now without a week off. And that just takes a toll.
We
So,
speculated about Lamar 3, 4 weeks ago when he skipped in practices. He didn't look as fast.
yeah.
Like
Oh,
Lamar's the most important guy to get a couple weeks. Like give him 10 days off, and you probably do some wonders.
yeah, well, I mean, he's the headliner, but everyone needs it. I mean, the guys up front protecting Lamar need it. The guys that are catching the football from Lamar need it. The defensive side of the ball, and we've talked about Travis Jones, for example, who's still on the injury report, playing through this ankle injury that he suffered back in week 7. It's week 12 now. So we're talking about someone who's been dealing with that and playing through that and missing practices and being limited and having some games where he's played a whole lot and other games where he hasn't played much. I mean, he's just played through it. I mean, that's the reality with so many of these injuries. And I don't need to tell you, Nestor. I mean, as much as we poke fun at the injury report, we also know that of the 53 guys on the roster, there are probably 40 guys who have gotten treatment at some point in the last couple of weeks, even if they don't show up on the injury report. So I think that bye week certainly helps. But yeah, when you look at what's to come, you mentioned the Philadelphia game 6 days after the Chargers. Everyone talks about Thursday night. I think if you look at it, and I haven't seen recent numbers, but I've seen numbers in the past. When you talk about a Monday night road game and then the turnaround for a Sunday game, that's a challenge. I mean, go back to earlier in the year. Now this was different because the Ravens went to Cleveland, but what happened on the back end of the game in Tampa for a Monday night? The Ravens lost in Cleveland 6 days later, right? So we know that can be a challenge, especially when you're talking about a cross-country flight. So I think the only silver lining about the scheduling for the Eagles game is that it's at least a 4:25 late afternoon game. So maybe you don't worry so much about kind of sleepwalking through the beginning of the game, but it's a challenge. They go to the Giants after the bye week. There's nothing tricky about that, right? I mean, the Giants just benched Daniel Jones, which may or may not make them better. I don't even know. I mean, that's just the state of the Giants right now. They're a mess. So nothing to be concerned about there. But once again, short week, Steelers coming to town 6 days after that game. Fair to point out that they're going to be in the same boat. They've done this scheduling deliberately from the standpoint of these 4 teams that are kind of in that pod for Christmas Day. They all play the Saturday before. So it's not as though they're going to go up against the Steelers or against the Texans with a disadvantage. Both teams are going to be in the same boat in that way, but it's tough, especially if you do have some injuries where you look at it and say, okay, on a normal week, this guy would be ready to play, but when it's 4 days after the previous game, maybe not. So I think it's a challenge, yeah, but this is also why everyone makes so much money in the NFL, right? They do these kind of things. And I think everyone understands that. So if you're John Harbaugh, if you're these players at this point, it serves no purpose whatsoever to dwell on it or to moan it or moan about it or lament it. It really is just a matter of, okay, what do we do scheduling wise to try to maximize our rest time, maximize recovery, do all the things that we need to do to be ready physically. There's also a mental challenge to this that I know a lot of players, especially veteran players who maybe have a better idea of how to take care of their body. They've acknowledged this, where they've said, look, the short week is a given. It's a challenge for all of us, but it's a challenge for the other team too. But a lot of these guys have often talked about the mental side and just being prepared and knowing, okay, a Pittsburgh game on a short week, that's not as much prep. These teams know each other so well. But when you're going on the road to face the Houston Texans on Christmas Day on a weird Wednesday game, yeah, that's a little bit different. And it's the same for both teams. Again, it's not a disadvantage, but it's just a challenge. And when you're a team, and you alluded to it, I don't know if I'd say the Ravens are overrated because, I mean, you are what your record says you are. I think we all look at them from a talent level standpoint, from a potential, from a ceiling standpoint, and say, this team looks like it could win a Super Bowl. I don't think anyone looks at them and says, there's no way in heck that they can win a Super Bowl. I don't think anyone says that, but you've got to be consistent, right? You've got to go out there and play to whatever your talent level is. And Thursday night was a great case study of that, where you see Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and putting aside the snow, even earlier in the game, you kind of look at those teams, and I don't know about you, Nestor, but I look at them and I say, the Ravens lost to both those teams, really? Like from a talent level
Well,
standpoint, I
there's
think
where
the
I'm going with
Ravens,
the overrated part, or just not being
yeah,
nice to the Ravens based on their schedule, or based on,
frustrating.
yeah, and looking at it and saying, thought you guys were better than this in a general sense, but we've gone through
Got to do it.
penalties, the bad part of the defense, the pass rush being leaky, when Derrick Henry's not running the ball well, what happens then? Yeah, and then Lamar has not a great game the other day, and you're like, oh, Lamar, well, he ain't gonna be perfect every week, and he's been perfectly perfect for 2 seasons as an MVP, so I can't get down on him, but at some point he's going to give a game or two away throwing picks and doing stupid stuff because quarterbacks do that. I see all of them do that because there's so much on them. And yeah, this is not where they want to be. Now that being said, Pittsburgh backed up. They're back
Yeah.
in a position to win the division again, like in a real way. But they have tougher games. I mean, and I look at the whole schedule going down to Houston on Christmas, seeing his brother Monday, everything we're talking about for next week. I mean, they could lose Monday and Sunday next week. They're not markedly better on the road than the Chargers are. They're just not going to roll the ball out there. They have to play a lot better than they've been playing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you've got to go play winning football. You got to go beat a quality team on the road, in prime time. Now, I don't think the atmosphere is going to be daunting. There aren't enough Chargers fans in LA. So I mean, I don't know how many Ravens fans will be out there considering they just did that trip last year on a Sunday night game. So is there quite as much juice for Ravens fans to travel? We'll see. I mean, it's Thanksgiving week. It's kind of an odd time to do a trip like that. So we'll see what the crowd looks like. But it's a team that's playing good football. And I think for as much as I made mention of my interest in seeing how the Ravens defense performs against the Chargers offense because of what we saw last week in Pittsburgh, the changes in the back end of the defense. I mean, is Roquan Smith going to be available or not? What does linebacker look like if he's not available? How do you juggle a rotation of Malik Harrison, Trenton Simpson, and Chris Board? I think Kyle Hamilton probably wears the green dot helmet then under that scenario because I don't think any of those linebackers play every snap under that scenario if Roquan is out.
We can't
But
bring Patrick Queen back. He already played twice this week,
sure,
but I'm like, this is where you really are like, whoa, we're really downgraded with no Patrick Queen from where we were last year. And now Roquan not being great and then being injured. I mean, we go back to April, we say, well, we're going to lose Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. Let's go play football. It wouldn't look very good.
no, of course not. And look, we'll see what happens there. I mean, I think one of the more frustrating elements of Smith's hamstring injury on Sunday was he was having his best game of the season. I mean, that looked more like 2023, 2022 Roquan Smith before he had to exit early in the fourth quarter. So we'll see. They haven't ruled him out at this point in time. I do think he's one of those guys that you take it right up to game time, but it's on the turf. You still have to your point, the schedule coming up, big game against Philadelphia to follow this. You got to be careful. You don't want Roquan Smith having a bum leg the rest of the year.
I would
either.
think you could
So,
lose a game real easily on Monday night without Roquan Smith. You know what I mean?
sure.
Like in the middle of the what Jim Harbaugh likes to do, what Justin Herbert's going to do, the running game, what they're going to bring, just
Throwing over the middle of the field.
yeah,
Yeah.
which was never good to begin with.
Right.
To your point, it might be an upgrade. I don't want to say that about Roquan, but
No.
yikes.
They don't have an upgrade. I mean, that's the thing.
They don't.
When you kind of look at it through that lens, it's like, okay, I get it. Roquan hasn't been very good in coverage this year. How much of that is him? How much of that is what Trenton Simpson's doing next to him? How much of that is scheme? How much of that is the safety play behind him on those over routes? I mean, all of those factors.
I think some of that scheme, by the way. I
think it's all those things. I don't think, and let me be clear, I'm not giving Roquan Smith a pass either. Let's be very clear, but I don't think it's as simple as Roquan was great and now he's bad in coverage. I think it's two or three of those variables at work at the same time.
I think it's taxing him to some degree too. I think it's sort of like he's not what he used to be. We're not worried about him in that way. And if we pick on him once, we'll pick on him twice. But let's be honest. Let's not worry about him. Let's go the other side where, Brandon Stevens is over there. Like they had other options, but he was no longer, let's stay away from Roquan. He plays angry, because I think 5-6 weeks into the season this year, we all looked at it with the defense suffering on the back end and saying, where's the suffer? And then you and I started saying, is he a liability out there in pass coverage?
Well, I mean, it's just whether we're talking him individually or just that area of the field, the middle portion of the field has been so problematic. I mean, I'm stating the obvious there. Short, okay, fine. Anything in front of them, it hasn't been that big of a problem. But that intermediate, those over routes over the linebackers in front of the safeties, and then obviously the deep balls have been a massive problem. And again, how much of that's Roquan? How much of that is Trenton Simpson next to him? How much of that is Roquan trying to account for an inexperienced inside linebacker next to him? Maybe spacing and different things along those lines get out of whack. As I mentioned, when you're in zone coverage, linebackers need to take a deep enough drop, but you also have to trust the safety coming up and behind you and understand that the spacing needs to be right there. So if the safety's not doing his job, what impact is that having on the linebacker? And from a perception standpoint, when guys like you and me don't know what the assignment is on any given play, someone might look like they're the one who messed up when it might be someone else, right? So there's all of that going on. But
and there's clearly discord too, right? Let's throw that in, that what's going on with Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson and John No Speaky, and like it's teetering a little bit right now in a way that I wouldn't have predicted if they had stayed healthy, and they've been pretty healthy, that it would teeter in this way. But to your point, and I will echo that, if Roquan Smith's not there, anything they have is a real downgrade. No matter what you think of him, the rest of it, it's a downgrade if he's less than 100% with a hamstring. If he can't run, he can't play.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. I mean, you're talking, okay, Malik Harrison will spell him in early down situations. Playing the run, I think Malik Harrison's a perfectly capable linebacker playing the run. But asking him to do anything beyond that, that's not going to go well. And then you're talking about Trenton Simpson, who has had his moments in pass coverage, but he's also looked like a second-year player in his first year as a starter lots of other times. And I mean, we even saw in Pittsburgh, Chris Board, who's a veteran special teams guy, actually seeing some time in some obvious passing situations as a linebacker. Even before Roquan got hurt, he was actually replacing Trenton Simpson on a few plays here and there. So that's messy. And then couple that with all of that with the fact that Kyle Hamilton was playing off the ball more so in Pittsburgh because they benched Marcus Williams, and Eddie Jackson didn't even make the trip and wasn't playing much before then anyway. And so now you have Ardarius Washington and Kyle Hamilton playing more of your two deep safety looks, which I agreed with. I'm not disagreeing with that or criticizing that, but there very much is the scenario here where Kyle Hamilton not playing closer to the line of scrimmage as frequently. I mean, Nestor, that's a robbing Peter to pay Paul principle right there, where out of necessity.
That's like telling Lamar not to run.
Right, exactly. So you could, and there are times where out of necessity, you're saying, all right, that's the prudent thing to do, but that's probably going to hurt us in some other ways, and that might hurt our upside. But
they lost the game.
but not because of the defense on Sunday. I mean, the defense played very well, but over the long haul, especially, if Hamilton, and let me be very clear, Kyle Hamilton's still going to play closer to the line of scrimmage plenty, but that was a season high number of snaps he took as a deep safety in Pittsburgh. If we see that trend continue, I'll be interested to see how other offenses now try to attack that. Will the Ravens be a little more susceptible against the run, which, by the way, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing if it means they can clean up the back end of their defense. I will give a little bit more on the ground if it means you're going to limit the big plays in the passing game. Mike McDonald flat out admitted that at different times over the last couple years. So I think for me, I look at what's been an elite pass defense, and with some of these changes, and specifically to Monday night, if Roquan Smith doesn't play, if Kyle Hamilton once again is playing off the line of scrimmage more frequently, not all the time, but more frequently, then yeah, it might cost you a little bit against the run. But if it means I can eliminate the big plays and get off the field in obvious passing situations a little more frequently and all of that, then I'll gladly take J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards getting a little more on the ground. Now, to a point, I'm not at all suggesting that you can allow a team to gash you on the ground, but I think there's a middle ground here that the Ravens, I think they're cautiously optimistic. Maybe they found some things in Pittsburgh, but like I said, I need to see that on Monday night. I need to see that against the Eagles next Sunday in terms of whether this defensive performance against Pittsburgh was truly a breakthrough, or was it, well, let's call a spade a spade. The Steelers aren't a great offensive football team, and I think we even saw that even before the snow took over in Cleveland on Thursday night. I think that's still a team that's limited offensively. Russell Wilson has his moments, but he's not the Russell Wilson of a decade ago, and that running game is good at times, but other times it lacks some efficiency. I mean, they had some short yardage situations they flat out failed. So, it's not as though Pittsburgh's a juggernaut offensively. So, yeah, let's see what this
Pittsburgh would have
Ravens.
been a lot better served to play better in the first half.
Oh yeah, no
once
question.
the snow came,
Then it's a coin flip.
Yeah.
Then you have no idea what's going to happen then. Right. So, but
when it was
I
3-0, I looked up toward halftime. I'm like, oh boy, and I saw the forecast, and then the snow. Man, the snow.
That was fun. That was fun.
Dude, it went from 0 to 100. I mean, the Minnesota game here a decade ago, one of our all-time favorite events, like that Cleveland thing, it went from nothing to a lot real quick.
Oh, it did. No question about it. So, but I think for the Ravens, again, what happened in Pittsburgh defensively was something to be encouraged by, even in the defeat. But if you go out there on Monday night and Herbert throws for 3 or 4 touchdowns, and they're scoring in the 30s, even if you find a way to win, you'll take the win gladly. But all this optimism about the defense will kind of be back at square one, right? I mean, I think, right now it's, hey, Ardarius Washington's back in the lineup, and they finally benched Marcus Williams, and Eddie Jackson's going to be benched, and hey, this all worked, and the Steelers didn't score a touchdown against them, and that's all well and good, but you got to start stacking. And that's why Kyle Hamilton, he said it before anyone else could. He said, look, we all kind of thought this after Buffalo, when we held the Bills to 10 points, and then, well, we saw what Joe Burrow and the Bengals did against us the following week. So big game, important game. To your point, because of the loss to Pittsburgh, the standings feel better. Even though 1.5 games wasn't insurmountable by any stretch, but you got a chance to gain ground here. Do it. Especially knowing that you are going to have that short week to follow with the Eagles, who are also playing really good football here of late, coming to town. So this is a big one to state the obvious, right? And that's part of what you were saying. I mean, no matter what you think about this team's potential and its ceiling, and I still think it's very high overall, they're 7-4, which is playoff good, but it's not top of the league. Oh my gosh, you're amazing good. 7-4 is, they're from a record standpoint, they're a top 8, top 10 team rather than a top 2 or 3 right now.
They're a bad good team, as you say. So, I'm going to start using that.
No, I don't. Oh, okay, bad good team.
They're a 4 seed or a 5 seed or a 6. That's a bad good team.
I mean, a bad good team is that's kind of what I'd call the Steelers the last couple of years.
Fair enough. But they were in first place day before yesterday, so
Well, I said the last couple of years, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. Hey, again, they've got to go out and show that this defensive progress that they made in Pittsburgh, albeit in a defeat, is real. If they do that, I have full trust in Lamar Jackson and this offense to get back on track, right? I do. January and all that, we'll talk about that when that time comes. But in terms of just getting back on track, the offense was due for a bad day. That again, that's why it was disappointing that you still could have won if Justin Tucker makes his kicks. Something as simple as that. So, you gotta move on and look ahead. And this is a good football team they're playing. The Chargers, and for them, on the flip side, I'll just make this final point. They're trying to show how real they are. They haven't exactly beaten a juggernaut slate of opponents to this point. So this is a big game for them as well, nationally televised, to go out and beat one of the perceived heavyweights in the AFC.
Well, I would say Jim's never beaten his brother, so he,
that too.
I would think that underneath of all of that, I know them both. I still like one of them. Last thing, and we'll reconvene, on all of this, and certainly Tuesday morning we'll be up early after all of this, even though it's Thanksgiving week. All the music classic stuff's out there, the Crabcake tour schedule, all that's out there. Justin Tucker. I don't know. We've never had to discuss this, right? There's been a miss here and again and whatever, but like the fact that there's blood in the water and the lack of trust and missed 4 field goals into 4 losses, and like, where are you on this? I haven't giving you oxygen on it because we're always talking like after a game.
Right.
But like between games on all of this, you know, I don't know that the operation's smooth. I don't know that the holder, the old wolf pack, like all of that. You're out there, you see him. I see him sell chicken and I see him sell Royal Farms coffee and drink Starbucks constantly. But other than that, I have no emotion about it or his Hall of Fame status or his singing or his Dr. Pepper commercial. I don't have any of that other than if you can't make the kick this week, like I don't you're not Justin Tucker Hall of Famer to me. You're the kicker who needs to come in and kick 50 something yard field goals because that's what we become accustomed to. That's what we're paying for. That's what the league wants. And if when we replace you, it's not going to be to find Matt Stover again and find somebody that can kick 42 yarders regularly. Um, it's been weird, dude, because I think the last 5 or 6 years, I don't want to say he's been shielded in some way because he made Hall of Fame kicks and all that. They score touchdowns around here. You know what I mean? He hasn't. This isn't the Flacco thing when he was younger, where he could come in and steal 3 points with a 56-yard field goal in the first quarter because Flacco stalls or somebody jumps off sides or whatever the thing would be in 2015, 16, 17, 18 when they weren't winning, but he was building that resume of I'm going to kick 68-yard field goals. I don't know where the future is, but I know you look at it and forget his name's Justin, even if you like him or don't like him, and that's immaterial for me. It's just 35-year-old kicker, the profile of all of this, the money, and he's going to have to make big kicks, right? Like this isn't, they're not going to bring anybody else in. Games are going to be on the line. Snow's going to be falling as it was, like the rest of the way. How do you feel about him and how do they feel about him?
I mean, I think I would tend to agree with what John Harbaugh said on Monday when he was asked the question. And the simple fact that he was asked this question speaks to where we are right now, where he was asked if the Ravens consider bringing in any competition, anyone for a look-see, anything like that. And he said, and he did provide the caveat at this point, no, our best bet is to get Justin Tucker back on track. And I agree with that. I mean, if the next Justin Tucker is out there right now, he's probably kicking in college right now. He's probably not sitting out there on the free agent.
He's not the 33rd kicker out on the street.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Because we go pay attention sometime over. Go back and look at the NFL transaction wire over the last 2 months, and you'll see how many kickers are signed and released and signed to practice squads and cut and all.
But if he's the eighth best kicker in the world or the 10th best kicker in the world, you're going to have to suck it up, Buttercup, and go with him. I mean,
and look, I mean, right now he's been worse. He's been worse than that. Over the first half of this season. But all of that being said, I think you have to ride this out at this point. Now, I think it's worth noting, and we talked about this a lot, part of what was so unnerving about what happened this past Sunday was Justin Tucker had kicked at the place formerly known as Heinz Field, been better than anyone there. He'd missed one kick in his career. It was his rookie year. He hadn't missed a kick there in 12 years, and he's kicked plenty there over the years. So that was unnerving. However, you're going to a dome. You're going into an indoor stadium on Monday night. Conditions should be perfect, right? This should be the game for him to get right. This should be the kind of game where if he can have a 3 for 3, and not that you want the Ravens to settle for field goals, but let's say, he hits one from 52, he hits one from 46, and let's say there's a 33-yarder or something like that. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. He does that and he hits all of his extra points. Suddenly, you're feeling a little bit better. Not that everything's fixed, but you're feeling better. And for me, it's just that incremental get better. Just don't let this thing go sideways, right? I mean, and we've talked about this. It started out early in the year that it was the 50-plus thing, and then he started missing from just inside 50. And, he missed from 47 this past week. Missed an extra point the week before.
The extra point during his time in the league has gone from nothing to something, right?
Something, sure. Yeah. And, we saw, and look, let's be clear. Justin Tucker has, as amazing as he's had some stretches in his career where it hasn't been quite as great. It's just maybe it wasn't magnified at the time. In 2015, go back and look at his numbers in 15. They weren't all that great. But you know why? You know what? No one cared because the Ravens were terrible that year because that was the year they were injured like crazy. And, Suggs at the beginning of the year, Flacco in what, late November or whatever it was,
Yeah, the day
December.
before he was going to do the show with me.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's not as though he's never gone through this, but this is as an extensive struggle, an extensive period of time where he struggled as we've seen. So I'm not at the point yet where you're bringing other guys in or you're thinking about cutting them or anything like that. But if he misses 3 kicks on Monday night, then maybe we're talking about it. I noted this in my 12 Ravens thoughts after the Steelers loss. I agree with John Harbaugh. I will say this behind the scenes, and I think this is going to be a much more notable storyline for this offseason and next summer potentially, depending on that. All depends on how he finishes out, right? The Ravens should definitely be updating the Rolodex as in terms of kickers and looking at kickers and scouting guys and paying attention in college and all that. Because if he has, let's say his season kind of continues on the rest of the way where it's, the kindest way of putting it, inconsistent, up and down, maybe has some good games, still has a couple more shaky games, whatever. I would say at the very least, you're bringing in someone to compete with him next spring and summer. I think that's fair at the very least. So, but that's next summer. In the interim, in the meantime, the here and now, I still think your best bet is to try to get him right. And I think the biggest challenge right now is not Randy Brown and Chris Horton trying to work with the overall mechanics of the operation. I think at this point it's between the ears. I think for anyone, and Justin Tucker has never lacked for confidence, but as we said, he's never had this prolonged of a period of struggle where I think the confidence is a question. And I'm sorry, only he can figure that part of it out, right? I mean, ultimately, when you're talking about a confidence issue for an athlete, you can bring in a sports psychologist or you can talk to someone who's done it before or been through it before, and those things can help. But ultimately, it's got to be you that feels like yourself, like you can go out and do it in the way that you have for so long. And I think that's where the Ravens are. They haven't lost all confidence, but man, he's as John Harbaugh said after the game when I asked him about it, he's like, Tuck's got to make kicks. He knows that. I mean, we got to have those. I mean, it cost them a game on Sunday. So, that's kind of a long answer for saying, I think he's still your best option, but
And they're playing in a dome on Monday, and he's going to have to do some kicking.
Get well.
I'm
right?
going to eat some chicken. He's going to do some
get
kicking.
well game. Yeah, this is a get well game,
good.
kicking inside.
I'm going to do the Monday night Royal Farms thing all night long
There you
because,
go.
like, whoever put that on the social media at halftime was friggin' brilliant. More kicking, less chicken. Less chicken, more kicking. I don't know. I'll eat all the chicken. I mean, Robbie over Robbie's first base disparaged gas station food on his timeline the other day, and I wasn't going to have that. I
saw
had a picture
that.
of me
I was shocked
holding
by
my
that.
fried chicken up. I'm like, that's just more chicken and Western fries for me. That's what that means, getting at the Royal Farms. Luke Jones is powered up by Royal Farms, as well as our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, getting back and forth to training camp and Ravens camp, I should say. We did some baseball around here. We're kind of holding our breath on that. We've got Thanksgiving. We've done music classic to the nth degree. I haven't even released the modern stuff. I haven't even gone back into the archives and whipped out ZZ Top and Paul Stanley and a whole bunch of rock and roll Hall of Famers that I have unearthed. Joan Jett, a whole bunch of stuff. So Hart, just stuff I'm finding in a box. That's all going to be coming out through Thanksgiving, so make sure you're checking that out at Baltimore Positive. Luke can be found at Baltimore Luke. I can be found anywhere the Maryland Crabcake Tour will be and is going. I was in Carroll County last Thursday. Tim Watts and I did an unbelievable segment. Chris Richards came on. We talked about gambling and football and the OTB and his license up there with Bet Parks. Also had a great segment with my friend Karen Faulkner, who is a leadership advisory person, just a friend of mine in the real world through networking. Been meaning to have her on. She lives in Hampstead. We had a great story. She spoke a lot about mental health and a lot about physical health and the important things to power us all up through the holidays, especially when it gets dark at 4 o'clock. At least it gets dark at 4 o'clock on Monday. And we have Monday Night Football. It's the HarBowl. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour December 4th at Coco's. Marcella's already told me that she's whipping up the eggnog, the special eggnog out there, and I'll have the coconut shrimp. I think Rasig's going to be out with us on December 4th. December 5th, we're at the BMA at Gertrude's with John Shields and Dan Rodericks. On December the 12th, we're back at Fadley's at Lexington Market 2 weeks before Christmas. Get all the shipping and the orders in. Order them from everywhere. Order them from Costas on the 18th. We're going to be there for Christmas with Gina Shock. And on the 17th of December, I have added a special non-crab cake related crab cake tour stuff. They probably put a crab cake on the Italian menu down at Amici's. We'll be there on the 17th. And I'm going to be tearing into everything, Dan. The meatballs. I'm going to have chicken Lorenzo. I'm going to have the calamari. Luke, I don't know if you noticed about Amici's, but they year round have a baseball standings like thing above the bar. And it's completely wooden. And it's like the old Wrigley Field. They put up the numbers, they put up the standings every single day in the American League East. And in the off season, there are special messages on the wall at Amici. So I don't know what the message is going to be December 17th. I hope it says, "Welcome to Birdland, Juan Soto." Maybe you're laughing at me. Why are you laughing?
Great. It'd be great. I'm all for that. I'm not fighting with you about that anymore because it implies I wouldn't want them to sign Juan Soto. So I'm just not
this. You and I had an honest to God fight about baseball on the air this week. And I would just say from my heart of hearts to you on the Stockholm Syndrome reference, for all of you, raise your expectations on what this could and should be. Don't live in Angelos land until Rubenstein shows us that he's Angelos. Like, let's live more like the Cardinals or the Padres or the Phillies or teams that could afford to sign players. And that's where I would say on Thanksgiving, as we sit around here, I'm thankful that we have a different baseball owner, but I hope it's not like a Who song, meet the old boss, same as new. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. It's happy holidays. We'll see you on Monday talking football around here.